Greetings everyone and welcome back to another video. I threw a poll up on my community tab to ask what videos you guys wanted to see. By popular demand, or more accurately a tiny plurality, you've decided to listen to a nearly middle-aged man talk about his favorite digital toys. Faith in humanity restored. So what's this video about anyway? Well, these are my favorite ships, not necessarily the most powerful or the best value for money or anything like that. If the top 10 C-Store ships video was the meat and potatoes, then this is the dessert. This is purely about what ships I enjoy flying for all the subjective stuff like looks or theme or nostalgia or whatever. These ships come from every source in the game, including event ships, C-Store ships, lockbox and lobby, and a couple of promo ships, though none of them made it past the honorable mentions. I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't put all of the ships I like on the list. For one thing, the video would be an hour long, and I'd be stretching the definition of the word favorite to its breaking point. I've narrowed it down to 10 favorites and 3 honorable mentions. These aren't in any kind of particular order, so I haven't bothered to number them. They all have a little story attached about why I like them. Feel free to use the time codes in the description to skip around. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Well, let's get started with the honorable mentions. First up, the Tzen-Tar Dreadnought Carrier. A lot of people were gobsmacked by the stats blog when this thing was announced. It definitely felt like power creep thrown into a promo box to squeeze cash from the DPS players. That's not why I wanted it though. I wasn't really doing the DPS thing back then, but I've always enjoyed flying carriers, so get used to seeing them on this list. And when I'm playing the game casually, it's pretty rare to find me in a ship that doesn't have at least one hangar bay. One of the special things about this ship, at the time anyway, was that the frigate pets were not restricted to the ship, and I wanted them. Ironically, now that we have multiple frigates that can go on any hangar, I don't do it very often because they all kind of suck. Although, now that I say that, I probably should do it more often for fun. When I did start getting into DPS and torpedoes became the build du jour, and obviously I began appreciating the ship for those aspects as well. Having both Miracle Worker and Command makes for a very potent combo. It's a great ship, but unfortunately it's kind of clunky. You can make the impulse, turn rate, and inertia serviceable with some tweaking, but it still feels like flying a brick. The trait is great, the pets are fun, and I do love the ship. I just love it more on paper than I do in practice, so that's why it's only on the honorable mentions list. The Alachi Command Dreadnought Cruiser. Here we go, promo ship number 2. There are 2 things that keep this ship off the list. I hate how it looks from behind, which is how you view your ship 99% of the time, and I don't actually own it. I've played with it quite a bit on Tribble. In fact, it was the first ship I opened over there because I was excited to try it. Surprisingly, it's actually aged very gracefully with the torpedo meta. A 5-3 weapon layout with command seating is a powerful combo right now. I love the big detachable craft and the different hangar pets. It's just a really cool ship. I'm also a fan of the Alachi Battlecruiser and nearly put that on here instead since I actually own that one. The legendary Sovereign Cruiser. I knew some version of the Enterprise would end up on the top 10, and I went back and forth with this one and the one that's on the list, but eventually it got bumped back down. The design is incredible and the Miracle Worker seeking makes it very good for beamboats, which is the most immersive way to play a cruiser in my opinion. This is one of those ships I pull out for long grindy events with time-gated TFOs. Using a beamboat means I don't have to worry as much about positioning and I can just chill out while flying something stylish. With those out of the way, let's move on to the main event, the top 10. Again, these are in no order. I could put them in some kind of order, but it would probably fluctuate with my mood day to day, so that's a bit pointless. Best not to take this too seriously. The Dhailkhina Command Strike Wing Warbird. This is one of the newest ships in the game, and it's quickly become a personal favorite. I loved it so much on Tribble that I picked it up on holodeck, which I don't usually do. Since then, it's become my top parsing ship on all maps. I love the design, I love how the pets help enable a specialized build, I love it as a torpedo platform, it's just a really great ship. It does what the Tzen-Tar can't. It's a lot more pleasant to actually fly due to the much better maneuverability stats. It comes from a lockbox, so it's a bit pricey. There are plenty of other ships that would also perform similarly, like the Earhart from the C-Store, which I criminally underrated in my review due to ignorance of torpedo builds at that time. Still, C-Store ships tend to be a bit bland, and the DK has lots of flavor. the Khopesh Tactical Dreadnought Warbird. Let me start this one by saying that I really prefer the Tier 5 Scimitar skins. I find them to be way more attractive than the Tier 6 skins. This ship is also part of the reason why the Sheshar didn't make the top list. In terms of specs, it's very similar, and in fact this ship has a tactical captain's seat instead of an engineering. It has lots of flavor, cool frigate pets, and it's been a consistent performer for years and years. It feels like a lockbox ship, and if it were released in modern times, it almost certainly would be. The Ryn Kodan Carrier. There's a lot of nostalgia here for me, which is good because I really don't fly it for the stats. If I were doing a proper review, this might be the lowest scores on the entire channel. It's a Frankenstein's monster of ship classes with only the bad parts. It has the weapon layout of a science vessel with no secondary deflector, and the bridge officer layout, console layout, and maneuverability of a cruiser with no cruiser commands. The only specialization seat is a Lieutenant Temporal. Performance-wise, it's a clunker. However, I really like the design of this ship. The frigate pets have mines, which isn't unique, but it is kinda rare, and it was my first Tier 6 carrier. I flew this as my flagship for a very long time, perhaps longer than any other ship, and I still enjoy taking it out for a Tetrion-themed build once in a while. The Tholian ships. If I had to pick just one Tholian ship, I don't know if I could do it. The Ikitomi science vessel would definitely be in third place, but it's hard to choose between the carrier and the Dreadnought. I really like the JorogumoCarrier because, well, it's a carrier. However, it's a bit lacking in focus. It makes a good support ship or nanny craft if you prefer, just like its Tier 5 counterpart, but in terms of doing its own thing, it's a bit of an odd duck. That's fine with me, however, I like unique things even if they aren't super powerful. I used to run the Tholian red alerts daily when I started playing the game, and Dreadnoughts were always intimidating. I'm sure I could chew through them now like wax paper, but back then they were pretty dangerous. The design is very unique with the spinning sail, and it really feels like you're flying something worthy of the name Dreadnought. I've actually considered reviewing this ship multiple times, and I still may. The Tholian frigates, which can be used on both craft, are great debuffers. The consoles on all of them are really fun, but especially the one that makes the web wall and the web cocoon. Needless to say, I'm a fan of these ships. I even picked up the small craft just to complete the set. The Tarantula is a top-tier tank. None of those are reasons why I was drawn to these ships, but it's amusing to think that a high-end nanny run could have a Tholian Tarantula tanking and multiple Tholian Jorogumos as nannies. The legendary Glenn science vessel. I may have gone a bit overboard with praise in my review of this ship, but only slightly. I know the internet prefers the Vern, which is also a great ship and has those juicy universal seats, but I prefer the command seating, 4-2 layout, and just the design, frankly. To me, the Glenn is the pinnacle of ordinary science ships, even if it isn't absolutely the best performing. It feels like every single aspect was given the VIP treatment. The Glenn is a science ship for all seasons. I said it was a masterpiece back then, and I still feel that way now. This and another ship on the list are basically the only science ships I use anymore. The Aspero Support Carrier. I didn't single out any of the variants of my top 10 C-Store ships, of which this is the only overlap, but since the video is about my favorites, I'll narrow it down to just this one. Don't get me wrong, I like all the support carriers, but the Aatrox was my first ever C-Store purchase, and as a result I have a special fondness for it. If this ship didn't exist, the Aatrox would probably have taken its place, as it's simply too important to the narrative of my time with the game to leave out. I was hyped when I saw the support carrier bundle, and didn't even wince at the price tag. Not only is the Aspero brought up to date as a Tier 6 with a specialization seat, but they went above and beyond with the support frigates. I just love those things. I know that people wanted a more far-reaching carrier update, but this ship just puts a smile on my face. The Jem'Hadar Dreadnought Carrier. This was my first lockbox ship, and my attempt to graduate from the Ryn Kodan into something more suitable for DPS while still flying a carrier, as I was just getting into number chasing at the time. I had won the Tier 5 bug ship from the Phoenix boxes, which were limited time events back then, so I knew I could get the coveted frigate pets. As a Dreadnought, it had 7 weapon slots and a tactical captain seat. I also happen to really love the design. This ship is simply badass looking. Much like many of the older ships in the game with command seating, this one has aged gracefully and makes for an excellent performer even to this day. I flew this ship as my flagship for quite a while, and it's still one of my favorites. The Jem'Hadar Vanguard Warship. When the big Gamma Pack was announced, I was the most excited for the carrier, as you can probably imagine at this point. And while I do enjoy that ship and it may have ended up on a longer version of this video, the warship ended up getting all the attention and eventually my attention as well. The wingman pets helped to give it some personality, and it was my best performer until very recently, despite being worse on paper than some of my other ships. The Vanguard warship simply controls in a way that meshes with me. Piloting it feels like wearing an old glove. This ship is the reason I never ended up flying the Gagarin that much. I don't fly it like I used to, and it's the most likely to drop off of a future version of this list, but I can't leave it off when it's been so reliable for me and I've used it so heavily. The legendary Odyssey. Of all the Enterprise designs, the Odyssey is hands down my favorite. I did fly the Tactical Star Cruiser closer to when it was new, but then the cruiser fall meta fell out of favor after the rebalance and I went back to flying my carriers. Then the Legendary Bundle came out and I was so excited for this ship. Not only was I getting a new Odyssey, but it finally had a hangar bay. If you've seen my review of this ship, then you know I was disappointed. Still, it's one of my favorites and just beat out the Legendary Sovereign for a spot on the list. If I ever get the urge to fly an Enterprise, this is usually the one I reach for. The Paradox Temporal Dreadnought Science Vessel, the only other science ship on the list. This thing is quite the paradox. Pun absolutely intended. It has temporal in the name, but no temporal seat. In a feat of delicious irony, a temporal ship was released at the wrong time before temporal seating was in the game. Maybe they should travel to the future to get that sorted out. The same is true of the Anorax, which is quite possibly the most criminal thing imaginable. Despite that, my science character has the most roleplay and headcanon of any of my characters. I fancy her as living in the present time, well, as far as Stowe is concerned, but working for future Starfleet. I even dropped the Lobie on the Wells uniform to complete the look. The Paradox is a cool ship, with cool pets, command seating for Sci-Torp, and it matches the theme of my character. This list could have easily been 5 times as big, so while these are some of my favorites, the game has many great ships and many ships that I like to fly. Did you see any of your favorites on the list? Did I leave off any ships you thought would be here? I'm guessing a fair few of you are surprised by the absence of the Vengeance. I also didn't include the Atlas, although it was in a previous draft. Oh, and I left off the OG Connie as well, so sorry about that. Turns out making a list like this is pretty hard. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It certainly took long enough to make. Please like and subscribe and all that stuff. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.